Okay, cloud computing, of course, you guys are, I guess, a main player because you design the open source architecture that all the cloud computing is built upon. Now, the biggest controversy in banking, of course, is how much will the regulators allow their banks to embrace cloud computing and how much data can sit in the cloud. Security, of course, is the big concern. We've obviously seen in recent months quite a lot of security loss problems. Citibank was one, of course. There were situations in Australia, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, NAB. I don't know how much of it can be blamed specifically on open source and how much of it sits in the cloud and how much of it sits elsewhere. But of course, can you maybe address some of these concerns? Because the regulators, especially the Australian regulators, had been at one point very open about cloud computing, but I think is there going to be a bit of a backlash?
I worry there could be a bit of a backlash, which I think is ill-founded. And what I mean by that is most of the security breaches weren't related to the cloud. It's the fact that these big traditional systems also sit on networks that are connected to the internet, right? And so my belief, and I think most security experts would agree, having real expert organizations that know how to do security probably make more sense than every individual enterprise doing their own security. Right? If you look at some of the breaches in Australia, obviously the Sony breach, which was on the commercial side, well known, that had nothing to do with cloud computing. That just had to do with those big systems are on the internet. And so anytime you have big systems on the internet, you have to take security very, very seriously. Cloud is just another way where it's either with a third party or on a different architecture. There's nothing inherently less secure about that. And one could argue because it's more modern, it's actually more secure than the existing traditional systems that almost have to be hooked up to the internet. So, using more modern technologies are inherently more secure.
Mm-hmm. So, how many of these concerns about security are founded, and how many are unfounded? I mean, where is the real sort of issue in terms of security?
Security is a massive, massive, massive problem. It's the single largest problem, not just for banking, certainly in particular in banking because of the high-stakes nature of what you're doing, but in almost every category, right? That has very little to do with cloud computing. It has very much to do with the internet, right? So cloud computing is actually running workloads potentially off-site, in kind of generic pools of computers. That actually is inherently more secure than hooking up a system that was designed in the 1980s running Unix that was never meant to be on the internet that's now connected up and just doesn't have the security really required. And so it is a massive problem that we're going to have to deal with whether or not we deal with cloud. If we're going to have customers who want to deal with companies online, we're going to have significant security issues, and you'll read more issues going forward. And I talk to CIOs around the world in banking and in other sectors, and it's their number one concern.
So regulators' concerns over the security of the cloud are unfounded?
I think regulators need to be concerned with security, period, whether cloud or not, right? So, if your core banking platform, it has to be exposed to customers via the internet. That's really not necessarily cloud, but now your data is exposed via the internet. And so the security concerns are absolutely founded. Or grounded with the issues associated with the internet and the fact that these core systems are hooked to the internet. That's somewhat unrelated to cloud, which is a different architecture, and I would actually argue a more modern architecture and therefore inherently more secure architecture.
So how are you building a case for, how are you building a case for finding the weakest links in the security chain? I mean, maybe not in the cloud, maybe not in any of your open source solutions, but they're there. So obviously to strengthen the case for the cloud, wouldn't you want to be talking to the regulators to sort of educate them on how they can expose these weak links?
Oh, absolutely. We are, the banking systems are, a number of software companies are. When you say security in computing, it's almost like saying building security, right? They're the people who make the locks. They're the people who provide the security guards, right? There's the cameras. It's a massive infrastructure. And if you think of it the same way, imagine buildings popped out of nowhere before anybody thought about security. It will take years to work these issues out, and regulators need to take it seriously and be involved. Companies need to take it seriously. Vendors like Red Hat and other IT vendors need to take it seriously. So I don't want to at all minimize the complexity associated with this. It's less related to cloud and much more just related to the internet and connectivity of computers, which was not even envisioned when most of these computer systems were designed. And I do think it's going to be one of the things that's going to drive people to newer architectures that are built with security and interconnectivity in mind.
Okay. One of the things that I guess open source technology is, I think we mentioned it earlier, there is no sort of juggernaut of the industry to sort of to look towards. What's happening now, though, seems to be that there's a lot of alliances being created in order to, I guess, to create sort of, to express the wishes of the industry to create higher standards. I guess the Open Data Source Alliance is one of them. Virtualization, there's also an alliance being created. So how are these bodies becoming, I guess, the giants of the industry to sort of make things move forward?
Well, it's actually one of the fascinating things about how innovation will happen going forward. Traditionally, you had a few big companies that had their own R&D centers that did their own kind of innovation and then kind of announced products to the world and hoped they were better than their competitors. Today, I think almost even, well, certainly all the major technology companies and the Web 2.0 companies recognize that most innovation is going to happen in a collaborative way now. And so, that doesn't mean that there's not, enlightened self-interest among a lot of big players. So, Linux was really formed when IBM, HP, Oracle, Intel, and others really put effort behind it because they saw benefit for the whole industry. And certainly Red Hat's benefited well from that. Open virtualization, quite similar. People like HP and IBM and Intel and others recognize the value of having an open source virtualization solution to build clouds. The Open Data Center Alliance actually has quite a few customers in it. That's some of the major banks and other big data center users coming together. What's fascinating is you get these groups that come together, but those solutions end up rippling broadly. To use an example in banking, there's a new set of technologies around big data called Hadoop that was developed by Google and then really pushed forward by Yahoo. And I see banks around the world starting to roll this out so they can do just massive big data, real-time analytics to assess risk and make real-time decisions around customers and customer requests. These are things that, starting with one of the large U.S. banks, the system quoted by one of the majors in a traditional way was over $100 million. They implemented it for less than $2 million using these open source technologies. Again, developed by Yahoo to solve a whole different set of problems, but just as applicable to banks.
Okay. In terms of, I guess, alliances and growing and increasing sort of opportunities, Red Hat in particular, I guess you've had a long history of growing through acquisition. Of course, a lot of the companies, names that we mentioned, they've been acquiring quite heavily in recent years. What's your sort of strategy now going forward, and where do you see new acquisitions taking place? In which areas?
Well, I think this thing called cloud computing is so new. This is a paradigm shift as big as going from the mainframe to the PC, or what's called client server. Right? We're getting a re-centralization of computing into massive data centers that can be more secure and more efficient within mobile phones or very small devices serving as the front ends. And that's a paradigm shift that's massive. And in a shift that massive with a set of big companies, you have a lot of alliances forming, you have a lot of M&A. Red Hat would be very active buying technology companies, services companies, to fill out our sets of offerings. I think you're certainly seeing IBM, HP, and others being quite acquisitive. I think that's going to continue.
So which areas are you going to be focused on for acquisitions?
Primarily cloud data, cloud storage, cloud management tools, as we work to build out a fuller solution for our customers.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Jim Whitehurst, for speaking to us today, and good luck with that.
Thank you. Very nice to chat.